Welcome to the Nature Chuan Podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, Qigong, and meditation. This week, we continue our discussion of Hong Yi Xiang's martial arts in Taiwan. This time from another Journal of Asian Martial Arts interview, this time with Robert Yu, who was another student of Hong's from the early 70s. He also happens to be the uncle of one of our good friends from training, so that's kind of a nice coincidence. And so this one gets into more about Hong's school, training with Hong privately, mostly about Hong Yi and the five elements. So hope you enjoyed that. And then in the Patreon, we continue with the sweet potato saga of Bruce Francis at the School of Hong Yi Xiang. So check that out. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. Be well and take care of yourselves.
On today's episode, we continue our look at the Chinese martial arts traditions of Taiwan. The teacher Hong Yi Xiang is well known for his expertise in Hong Yi and Bagua, and we've been talking about him in the last couple episodes with the recollections of Marcus Brinkman. Today we're going to look at another issue of the Journal of Asian Martial Arts, this time from volume 11, number 3 in 2002 by Robert Yu. He also discusses his training with Master Hong, especially focused on the Five Fist of Hong Yi and his descriptions of Old Taipei. Robert's here in the States now, and I think he continues to teach back east. And his article is one of the best about Master Hong's life and just sort of his experiences training. So here's how he starts it off. So this is from 2002. He says, over 3 decades ago, I studied Xing Yi Chuan, form mind boxing, from Master Hong Yi Xiang in Taipei, Taiwan. When he passed away in June 1993, the then president of Taiwan mourned the passing of one of China's living treasures. Master Hong has since become a well-known teacher because so many of his students have carried on his teachings and have spread his influence throughout Asia, Europe, and the United States. I began training with Hong in September 1969 and stayed with him for 2.5 years. He taught classes 6 days a week for 3 hours each evening. I never missed a class. His evening classes were held in the gymnasium of an old elementary school. The gymnasium was a large open space with an uneven, cracked concrete floor. The windows around the gym were without panes, broken out long ago. I never noticed these windows until the winter months when it got cold outside and the doors were pulled shut. On the front wall hung 2 large Chinese characters symbolizing loyalty and respect. This neighborhood was the oldest section of Taipei, the Yanping district. The buildings were simple and elegant 3-storied red brick apartment houses that shared shaded porticos out on the street. They were homes to generations of families living together. Hong's home was here, on the same block as his office and the gym where we practiced. When I returned to Taiwan 15 years later, much of the old neighborhood remained intact. However, the old gym had been torn down. This reminds me of a couple other stories we've read about Master Hong. They had a school gymnasium that he, in Blurred Boundaries, his son talks about how I think it was the U.S. military made a deal to get him into the gym somehow, or it was an unused gym that they found so that he could expand his training and teaching. So that's a sort of a notorious location, this old...
That's the one on Dewa Street or whatever it is.
Maybe, yeah.
That they keep saying in the book.
And I remember in Kumar's book, he talks about it too, right?
I think so, yeah.
I think he describes it's just like this beat up old thrashed place, and there's a single light bulb hanging, sort of dangling overhead. It's like no frills kind of location. Yeah, and I think later, like in Marcus's article we were talking about last week, there's a picture of all them in a nicer little, maybe at Master Hong's house or something. There's sort of a space where he had there, but it was much smaller for just sort of smaller private classes. But this elementary school place, like in Blurred Boundaries, where they describe like there's 100 people in their training. I think they're talking about this old elementary school gymnasium that's much bigger and plenty of room and the broken out windows. Yeah, so that sets the stage for this tough old neighborhood where lowlifes and street thugs are a common sight. And so, okay, so now he describes what happens at class. Master Hong would usually stroll in shortly after class began. He wore dark baggy pants, a gray long-sleeve t-shirt, and tennis shoes. He would be smoking an unfiltered cigarette of Long Life brand name.
Boy.
After classes, the students would often go to a nearby tea house and talk into the night. Occasionally, Hong would join us. So Bob says, during my last 6 months in Taiwan, I sought additional training with Master Hong. I trained for 4 hours in the mornings in his office. His office smelled of the herbs he used in his practice of Chinese medicine. He had rows of drawers and shelves of brown glass bottles filled with herbs. On one wall, there was a picture painted by Hong of Bodhidharma surrounded by 12 animals that inspired particular Xingyi forms. On the high office walls were hung impressive ebony plaques with Chinese characters in gold leaf. And that's that picture of the 12 animals that is in the Way of the Warrior book and that he explains in the Way of the Warrior movie. That's sort of his artwork, or I think maybe Lowe said he copied it from a book or traced it out of a book or some other book or whatever. But he was always really stoked on his 12 animals. On the other side of Hong's office, there was a long, narrow hallway. I would do the classic 5 elements, Wu Xing form, up and down this hallway, from the front of his office to the back room, where there was a small kitchen where morning and afternoon tea were made. In this hallway, thick Chinese-style chest protectors, headgear, and lightweight Chinese-style boxing gloves were hung on hooks to dry out as best they could in this hot, humid climate. Further down the hallway, there was a wooden chart with the names of past and present students inked onto small wooden slates hung with hooks. Hung would sit and watch me and tend to the patients he had. Occasionally, he would correct me. He encouraged me by saying that the more I practiced, the more I would understand. Many times he had me practice standing meditation, Pitren, standing on one leg and then the other, alternately, for 4 hours in the hallway. Finally, at noon, he would give me money to buy lunch for both of us at the noodle cart on the corner. So it sounds like he was doing some hardcore training for 4 hours every morning at the office there. And that hot, humid climate he describes, the one time I did visit Taiwan it's definitely tropical. It feels like Hawaii or the Bahamas or something. It's just sweaty and hot and sticky. And I can only imagine just the way the gear would just get absolutely drenched in sweat from sparring or something. Oh my God. And so he describes the Pitren alternating legs for hours at a time. That sounds rough.
Sounds a lot like what I did with Bruce.
Yeah.
Just standing on one leg for a long time.
Yeah. It sounds like he wasn't getting a ton of talk. It was just mostly training and standing, which when it comes to Xingyi is probably the best way to go about it.
At least for the first couple of years. I mean, I think it's important to get that basis of standing, I don't know if needs to go on forever, but certainly there's there's an advantage of in those early years getting your hours in.
I think A, it's for leg strength. B, it's also just for teaching you endurance, and it burns away the people who aren't up for it. It's like horse stance in Shaolin or whatever. It's like if you can't handle this, then the rest of this you're not going to enjoy that much. So you might as well get used to long, boring, brutal pain and suffering.
And a lot of it is that the standing practice of Santi and holding the different positions in the Pitren sequence, that kind of is where you develop the basic directional structures and how to keep your body connected as you move and all of that. So it's your, that's why it's sort of the mother of the 5 elements, right? You got to get that Pitren thing before you can really manifest the other ones, because it's the structure, right? Metal is it's the element that provides this sort of congealing effect of making your body one piece, right? And that has to turn your body from frozen meat to soft meat. It's like you go where it's not doing it to where you're just gushy like water, but it has this thing of this like thawing, relaxing effect that you
Mm.
have from doing it.
Because you probably start off feeling hella stiff with your just standing in place with your arms extended. The temptation would be to really grip as tight as you can just to
Right.
stand there and just clench your legs so you don't fall over.
So you have to learn how to go from, tension, like holding that posture with tension
That
to
structure, yeah.
where something is coming out of it, right? Like and so this is that thing about the E, right? Like you have to get the mind to be able to hold you up rather than to just use force. And the whole thing of Xing Yi is being able to like move without clenching up, essentially. I mean, so
Right.
how do you extend and open your body, right? And at the same time relax, so
Mm.
you have that thing of um like making your body strong by letting your body relax. And that's hard to do. That takes a long time to kind of get through the stuff in your body that's stuck, right? So
Yeah.
you go from like, when someone hits you, just like hits your hand and then you bounce backwards, and then eventually it kind of like hits your body and then you bounce backwards, and then it hits your belly and you bounce backwards, and eventually you get to where that thing goes all the way to your feet, and instead of falling backwards you spring forward. And that's where that um metal thing comes into it. Metal can take any shape, right?
Mm.
You can heat it up and it can move into any shape and it will hold that shape, right? So that's essentially the idea of why you do your standing practice in the metal thing is metal takes that shape, it holds it
Mm.
until you decide to move it, and then it holds the next one, right? And then that allows you to, right, it's like the framework. So if you can hold any shape, then when you do the other elements, they hold their shape. And that's the Xing part of Xing Yi, right? Is the
Mm.
shape,
Right.
kind of.
I mean, and that Santi process is like it seems like all these, especially these internal martial arts, have this yin yang to them. Maybe that's why they're internal martial arts. It's like in Bagua, you're walking the whole time, so you got to figure out how to keep your structure while you're off balance and walking all the time. Tai Chi, you got to figure out how to have strength while you're being super soft and let go of that. San Ti and Xing Yi is different in that you start off with this, naturally you're going to be pretty hard and stiff. And so you've got to find a way to relax within this very, very concise and specific shape that's not necessarily super easy to hold. And all the structure and all the alignments have to be just right. But then at the same time, you got to be soft on the inside and flexible and loose so you're not so your blood flow needs to be strong and your energy needs to be quick and your legs need to be able to move swift, but at the same time you're doing all this in a standing position, which is incredibly the opposite, right? So it's
Right.
such a catch 22 or a dichotomy of just this dialectical of like you're trying to be soft inside but you're trying to keep this incredibly strong structure at the same time. And that can be super frustrating because you feel like my legs are shaking and I'm sweating like crazy just standing here, and I don't feel like I'm doing anything internal at all, right?
Yeah, I think Shingy and Tai Chi kind of take it from opposite perspectives, right? Like
Mm.
one is you go from relaxing Tai Chi. You relax first and then you fill it up, right? Until it
Mm.
has some structure. Uh Shingy is structure first, relax second, and they both
Mm.
end up where you have a relaxed body and a full chi essentially, but they come at it from different
Exact
perspectives.
opposites,
Yeah.
basically.
And the training is kind of that way too. I
Mm.
mean, in the sense that, like you said, one is you're doing it while you're standing, you're being, doing the Xingyi model. You're still on the outside, but you're
Hmm.
strong. And then you're starting to soften the inside. Where with Tai Chi, you're not still, you're moving, but you're trying to develop that softness while you're moving. And so, they kind of, again, it's like stillness and motion and
Right.
soft and hard and inside and
Right.
outside,
Right.
all these parallels, right? It's like they just,
And
it's
that Chinese
endless. But
philosophy is just always interwoven into this stuff. So you never get a straight answer. Like if you're standing and it's looking good, they'll tell you to soften up. If you're too soft, then get your structure better. Like basically you can't win. So you just got to keep going and
yeah, well,
4 hours a day for 6 months.
I think this is one of those, if you have to ask, you don't know. You're right. Like if you aren't sure if you have structure, you don't have structure. This is what internal martial arts do that's hard to put into words because the internal part is not visible, right? Like
Mm,
that's why it's called internal. It's not because you're doing some hokey thing you know, with your chi, right? It's because you're focused on doing things with the inside of your body, some of which has to do with energy, but most of it has to do with um, how the physical body relates to force, right? And where to put your body so that force doesn't hit you in the face,
mm,
right? Like, so there's a lot of training in terms of um like this. It's sort of like a yoga in a sense where you put yourself in a posture and then try to circulate in, and do things in that
mm,
posture because the
mm.
shape of that posture does something to your body.
It's going to
Shingy,
help that internal actions take
right.
place.
Shingy does exactly the same thing. It's like each of the five elements, you know, they all use the same physical actions, but they do it slightly differently, different emphasis on twist or open and close or stretch or whatever the thing is. And that does something a little bit different to the body. And then, that's a quote unquote different application, right? And so you have this like, how do you make an application um, how do you make a martial art with infinite applications with five moves, right? It's
Mm,
that things have to be able to morph and to change on the inside, right? So that the outside can do different things without getting stuck in a sense, right? And like
yeah.
that's where this like can so where the place where Tai Chi and Shingi meet is your body does what your mind tells it to do,
Mm,
and your mind and your body don't have this like argument with each other, right?
mm,
This is the Shing part of it, right? Sorry, this is the Shin, the heart mind, right? Where those two things join up. Remember, Marcus was talking about you got the Jing and the Shen, and then when they join up, they become the Chi. Or
mm,
you have heaven and earth, and when they join up, it becomes man, right?
mm,
It's the same kind of thing that, like, when your body and your intent click, it becomes this other unified thing. And that's you could just say it as you have to make everything one, right? Like you
right.
don't need to complicate it, but there's a lot of training that goes into, like, just for example, if you're standing in a posture, right, and somebody punches at you, that when you see that thing coming and you want to step back, that your feet move first, right, not your head, like,
Mm,
right, or if you're trying to turn, something's coming at you and you want to turn it, that your waist moves first, not your hand, right? And it's this kind of like training your intent to move from different parts of your body.
mm,
And that's what the different elements kind of do, right? It's like,
sure.
again, it's very similar to the Peng Lu Jian thing in Tai Chi, right? It's directional mostly, like different elements are different directions. So
Makes
you just,
sense.
you know,
I
learning
mean,
how to be solid in all directions.
totally. And that again, that's a huge component of Santi, the testing of being pushed from the sides and the front and the back as you hold the posture. If you're too stiff, you'll get pushed over. If you're too soft, you'll get pushed over. But if you've sink your weight and sink your energy into your legs, then it's a lot harder to push you over, even though you're not allowed to move your feet. In that case, you're testing the posture. You just got to strike that balance. And then
Right. This
that's,
is the earth thing of like, think about a big mound of earth that's about the size of a human being, right? That if you pushed on it, not much is going to happen to it. Your force is just going to transfer from that, blob into the ground because it's essentially the same thing as the ground, right? And that's what the sort of the final stage of Santi is. You've gone through all the elements and now you're at earth and you have that what we now call a root, right? Where
Mm.
you've just made yourself solid enough and relaxed enough that any force hitting your body from any direction is going to mostly go down and into the ground. Right?
Right.
Like, that there's something about relaxing and having your body in that weird position that just makes that easier.
Definitely.
Doesn't start. Yeah, this is where I like Ken Fish's phrase of, it's at first it's unnatural, but eventually the unnatural becomes natural.
Totally.
And that's kind of like, that's the part you can't, like, it's not like it's not like an external martial art where you go, okay, well, if you've learned this set of movements, it's time to go on to the next set of movements, right? Yeah, there's that piece of it, but there's also this other thing of like, when does that transformation, where your mind and your body, they speak the same language and they can
Mm.
communicate instantly, and that takes a while.
Right. I mean, for somebody who's interested in Santi and training in it and feeling frustrated, like, would you have any advice to pass on to someone who's feeling like they're not quite
I
getting
mean, the
it?
biggest thing is finding the right posture. So
Hmm.
the right physical structure is important.
So like
But
aligning your knees right so they're not.
yeah, like not overdoing like for example, the big one that is most people bend their back leg too much, right? Rather
Hmm.
than so they bend their knee rather than sort of sitting into their hip a little bit.
Hmm.
But the bigger thing is, for me at least, was have to breathe.
Hmm.
That you have to just stand there
Hmm.
and let your I just, let's call it your intent. Follow that breath in and out and in and out and in and out, and not get distracted by what's happening in your body, which is a bit of an oxymoron from
Right,
what
of
I just
course.
said, right? Because it's like, I just told you to do all this stuff with your body, and now I'm telling you to ignore it and breathe. And that's
Right.
that's the
There you
that's
go.
the conundrum that you have to deal with, which is how do I maintain that external shape, but then at the same time basically ignore it and do something internal, right?
Right.
And this is where there has to this separation of your mind is the only way I can put
Hmm.
it. That some part of your mind has to be like maybe 10-20% has to be focused on breathing, right? So that's like your dan yin. Essentially, you're just focused on breathing into your belly and then breathing out of your belly. And that has to become like back like second nature, right? To where you just don't think about it. So
Hmm.
the first year that I trained with Bruce, um all we really worked on was getting the alignment in the posture and breathing into the belly. So getting the idea that basically when something hits your hand, you don't stiffen up your arm and push your hand out. You relax your arm and you let that thing go into your belly, and then the whole body bounces forward, right? So it was all just basically Santi and half steps, right?
Hmm.
We didn't do anything where you switched hands for 6 months, right? I mean, you switch sides at some point, but like how to switch sides and do a actual P-trend, I mean that was 6 months. It was, first thing was how do you in that posture learn how to take something in, take it out, and do a lot of the like internal compression stuff. Heaven and earth, if you're a fan of Bruce's Nagong.
Good advice.
So
All right,
that's my
well,
advice. Yeah, just,
here,
stand
why
there.
don't we wrap up with a paragraph here from Robert Yu's article. It says, Hong Yi Xiang was an uncomplicated man with a big heart. He smiled a lot and liked to laugh, and he got very nervous when he had to talk in front of a large group of people.
Hmm.
In Taiwan, Hung was considered a master of Xingyi, The Chinese Martial Arts Society knew the teachers he trained under and his lineage. Hong liked to fight, and his reputation as a fighter was considerable. Once he deflated a long-standing feud between two martial arts schools by saying he would fight both the teachers. He was well known for his Xingyi trained fighters who won in national tournaments. His girth, thick wrists, gravelly voice, and having the surprising speed of a big man gave everyone pause when they considered this man's capabilities. And that all those statements remind me of all the different articles and books we've looked at about Master Hong. That idea that he's just such a he could be a rough master who's like a tough trainer, but he's also like a good-hearted, simple, kind, like person deep down. Like he might train your ass hard, but he was also a man of the people. He wasn't like a living saint like some of the masters we profiled who were like
Mm-hmm.
often, or even he wasn't one of these warlord guys who was out there killing people with swords and spears, but he was straight off the streets ready to brawl. But like he's a man of the people is the best thing I can come up with, where he was just like a good person and a family man and an average Joe on many levels, but an incredibly talented, sophisticated, and articulate martial arts teacher at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an like a certain type of intelligence that you get from doing internal martial arts for a long time. That's not necessarily like book smart, if you will, and it's not
Sure.
street smart. While they may also have that, there's
Sure.
like a, if you will, an internal intelligence. And I think that ideally makes you, kind of, uh, gentler, if you will, because there's a
Yeah.
certain, while you might, it's the, um, tigers are nice when they're purring, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so, it's that, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's just, there's a certain thing of when there's a maturity to it and there's a relaxedness to it and there's a like,
Mm.
um,
You're settled in yourself a little bit. You've got some self-knowledge from that internal stuff, kind
yeah.
of. I mean,
I
I'm
mean,
sure any expert in any field is that way, but there's something
but
about
this is
working
why
on the inside there.
this is my theory on why you don't see a lot of internal martial artists doing MMA. Because by the time you get to being able to really use internal martial arts to fight, something else has happened along the way where you kind of lose the desire to fight because you're dealing with all of these internal things that are why people want to hurt each other, right? These animal natures that come from our deeper emotions, and Xingyi was all about, get rid of the animal part of your fighting, right? Like this is Bruce's thing in The Power of Internal Martial Arts about, animal, human, spiritual martial arts, right? That some martial arts are just turn you into a bigger, meaner, better fighting animal. And that's fine if all you have to do is win a fight. But internal martial arts try to go to that middle or higher level of what about being a martial artist who uses the human intellect and the human, mind, if you will, to fight rather than just the animal emotions, right? So this
Mhm.
is where Xingyi falls
You're
into
trying to
that.
get an advantage by using those human
Yeah,
skills. And that's what makes it hard to learn too, but it can be incredibly valuable, and maybe you do sort of become a deeper person in the process, potentially. Maybe not
yeah. I
everybody,
mean,
but
this is all in theory, but
right.
it's the idea that like take it to an evolutionary scale, right? It took us a long time to be, to go from being like apes who fought with their hands to humans who fought with spears, right?
Right.
And that same kind of evolution has to go through your own mind and your own body,
True.
and that when you would choose to engage, this is the big caveat, is when you choose to engage that, because you can do Xingyi or any martial art without that. But
Mhm.
the nice thing about internal martial arts is you can plug in this, internal piece of it. And if you do that, you got no choice. It's going to activate some of this stuff, right? You
Yeah.
start doing the motion of bung chin, right? And you're doing that circle with your fist. And every time it passes by your liver, a little bit of your liver pumps and you get some movement in there. Then all of a sudden that liver channel starts opening up and it activates the emotion that goes with the liver, which is anger. And you start getting a little, all right, but you don't got no one to fight, so you just keep doing your bung chin and you keep doing your bung chin because the other side of the liver is uh being able to push through stuff, the ability to do, right,
To
to get things.
persevere.
Yeah. So you persevere and you just keep doing your bung chin. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in this place of stillness, like a nice, tree growing in the forest. And you're just, doing your bung chin with this total stillness. And there's no, you know, um anger anymore, right? It's just you and your bung chin. And you've gone through all that stuff without ever having to,
Hmm.
hurt someone, right?
Right.
You might do some applications, you might do some, light sparring along the way and things like that. But, if you're trying to overcome that animal thing, you really want to do it where you do the sparring and stuff to bring that up, and then you use the internal stuff to, chill it out.
Smooth it out and like complete it, kind of
Right.
like you're not stamping it down, you're letting it run its course until it's
Mm-hmm.
moved through your system, and
This is
that's
why,
the ideal.
yeah, and this is why the never doing martial arts doesn't work either, right?
Mm,
Because
mm.
you have to, since you got to scare the kitty cat a little bit to get its feathers to rile up so that you know how to calm it down, right? This is like you got to bring up the shit inside of you
Yeah.
when you meditate so that you
If you
have,
just avoid any conflict and
yeah,
avoid any trouble, that might work for a while, but then eventually it's going to hit. And if you haven't trained and practiced, then
then
you
oops,
freak
right?
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So I mean it's a really like I'm a big fan of this method of like, using martial arts as a way of engaging this other dimension of,
this darker side,
human
basically.
human existence. Yeah, that
Totally.
the reason why we fight, not just being a better fighter, it's like
Right.
I think that's where it's can give you more value than just, being, like I said, a bigger, meaner
And
animal.
and in the best cases, you're able to do that and back it up. I love the part where he says he deflated the martial arts field by declaring that he'd fight both teachers, which shut them both up
Oh yeah,
immediately.
I love
I could
that.
just picture Master Hong just gravelly voice, just like,
Hmm.
"What? You have a problem? Then I'll fight you both
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
same
yeah.
time." You know,
No, basically, neither of you are shit. So,
right? They're gonna both
yeah,
shut the fuck up.
yeah, yeah.
That's pretty good stuff. Now we're gonna move on to the Patreon and discuss a little bit more from Blurred Boundaries by Hong Yi Xiang, which is the story of Mr. K's training at Hong Yi Xiang's Tang Shi Dao School, known as the Western fanatic of martial arts. Um, and at this point, supposedly Mr. K has been allowed to enter the school, but he keeps getting criticized for not going deep enough to truly defeat his opponents and sink his fangs in. He keeps pushing him back. Um, and he says here, Mr. K, I don't want to waste any more time bickering. I only have two suggestions. First, until you have fully learned spiraling force, we won't teach you Bagua and Sancho. Second, do not bring up the thought of using money to buy Gong Fu. Please keep this in mind. Here we only teach Gong Fu, we don't sell it. I hope you make good use of this month. Put away your demands and go travel. Put away your demands and go traveling everywhere. In addition to Gong Fu, Taiwan's a very beautiful place. It's worth your time to look around. So we pick up right where Mr. K is getting a stern lecture on he wants to learn Bagua, but he's not allowed quite yet. So we'll dig into that here in a
Oh
minute.
boy. All right, man. We'll see you over on the
All
Patreon.
righty.
Okay. Hey, folks. Hope you enjoyed the episode there. If you want to hear the continuation on the Patreon, you can head over there and join for $5 a month. You get all the episodes ad free, plus all of our archive if you subscribe for the $10 a month premium membership. All right. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and be well.